Hello everyone, and welcome to this series of videos where I will be showcasing the modules that I've designed under the name Avalon Harmonics, and I'll be showing off different ideas for how to patch them. In this first video I will be showing off the CVMod8, so let's get started. As you can see, this module has 8 separate channels. Each channel can actually act as a way of modulating the input CV or providing static DC CV output. As you can see, if I move these sliders, it provides certain values on the outputs, and each of these can behave exactly like that. It also has inputs. You can input CV into them, and then you can attenuate the input CV and offset it using the slider. So let's see some examples of how this works. I'm actually going to turn on the scope like this, and I'm going to plug it into here. So let's see what's going on here. As you can see, when I move this, the value goes up. When I move down here, the value goes down. So you can provide an output of a static CV, which you can use, for instance, to control some sound or something like that. To give you a good example, I'm actually going to plug this into the Popple filter, where I will have chainsaw going into it, like that. So let's see. This is the sound of the filter, and if I move this, I can control the cutoff. Pretty convenient. Which means that you can have a module like this, like CVMod8, somewhere where it's easy for you to control different modules. For live performance purposes. Okay, but what else can you do? I can also input, for instance, an LFO into it, using this input here. So let's try connecting an LFO. Okay, as you can see, there is nothing going on yet. This is because the attenuation knob is lower down, so let's increase it. As you can see, there is now a value appearing, and I can control how much of the input there is. It's also indicated on the LED, as you've probably noticed earlier as well. So let's hear how this sounds like. It's a pretty convenient way to control the level of your input CVs. But I can now also offset it. Faster. And each of these channels here behave exactly the same, unless you configure them differently, which I will explain now. You might have noticed that the last two channels are set all the way to the bottom. This is because there are actually jumpers on the backside of this module where you can designate how a channel behaves. You've noticed that by default, it behaves that it goes from around plus 5 volts to around minus 5 volts. That's the default behavior. But if you move a jumper on the back of the module, you can make it so that it moves from around plus 6.6 volts to 0 volts. So in case you want a set of channels which are only positive in value, you can do that, as you can see here. I can also demonstrate this. I'm going to replug into here, like that. Whoops. And let's see how this behaves now. As you can see, it's on 0, and it goes up a little bit high, because obviously you can go much louder. Obviously, if the input is negative, it can still go into negative. But this is pretty useful if you want to have some sort of an input that's only controllable in positives, basically. Okay. Another useful thing that you can do is that there is a set of jumpers on the back which allow you to forward value of an input. This means that this channel can actually forward its output into this channel. I do actually have these two channels set up already like this. So let's have a look. Oh. Oh, there we go. Let's see how this behaves. Oh. If I move this, you'll see that both LEDs are lit up now. In other words, the output of this is going into the input of this and is combined with this, because if I move this slider, I can add the value onto the oncoming value. Pretty convenient if you want to combine some sort of values. This also means that you can use this to combine CVs together. Let's see how that works. I'm going to take two LFOs for this. Let's change this to triangle. We will use this as the first input. Let's have a see on the scope. And now I'm going to take another LFO and put it into the second input, like this. Give it a bit of a value as well. And we can now see that these two triangle inputs are actually combined. In other words, you can use this as a sort of makeshift mixer, which can be pretty useful if you have multiple CVs that you want to combine together and modulate differently. Because I can also offset it like this and play around with the values and get an interesting output from that. Okay, so to sum together, you can basically use... Actually, how does this sound? Yeah, that's pretty cool. So to sum things up, you have a total of 8 different channels. You can configure them differently. They can be either unipolar or bipolar in voltage. And you can also use it as a quasi-mixer if you configure it like that on the back. So let's see some other patching ideas of what you can do with this. Okay, so I have done some changes now, and I have rewired this whole patch a little bit. What I'm doing now is I'm generating a saw wave, as you can see here in the oscilloscope. I'm feeding it into CVMod8, and out of CVMod8, I'm feeding it into the Penrose Quantizer. And what I'm getting with this now is a little arpeggio. You can give it more notes using the Penrose. I can scale it using the CVMod8. and I can move its octaves up and down, or rather whole notes. So you can also use this to make sequences, for instance. Yeah, pretty useful. Okay, I have done some changes to the patch. We're still using chainsaw, like before. But this time, I'm making use of the earlier mentioned chaining of the channels on CVMod8. As you can see, I have some stuff plugged in here. I basically have the 1 volt per octave plugged into my CVMod8, and I am using CVMod8 to shift the octave up by exactly 1 volt. The idea is that you can use the module to basically create additional higher octaves, for instance, for your supersaw. So this was the original sound, the one that you're used to. But here on this channel 5, I now have another output, which is plus 1 volt. So if I add that to my chainsaw, instantly much more rich sound. We now have 2 octaves. Let's keep going. On the channel 6 here, I actually have another plus 1 volt set. So let's plug that in as well. What a lovely sound, right? We'd probably even play some really nice arps with that. Let's activate up. You get the idea. Basically, you can use this to create additional octaves for your supersaws, for instance. Okay, so this time I'm going to show you how you can use CVMod8 to create a sidechain. I currently have my KeyStep Pro emitting a repeating signal, which is basically fired on each kick, and it's triggering an ADSR, and I'm inverting that signal and inputting it here into channel 7, which is currently lowered. If you see that I increase it, you will see that it starts pulsing, a bit like a sidechain, right? We can hear how it sounds without it. Sounds like this. But if we increase the sidechain, you can hear that it starts sidechaining it. So this is another potential use, and something that I use this module a lot for, actually, whenever I'm making some kind of a beat track. Well, I think this covers a lot of different uses that I use this for. I hope this video was useful for anyone who wants to eventually get this module, and I will see you around in the next video where I show off more different modules. Bye bye.